All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to call the regular meeting of the Board of Finance to order for Tuesday, November 19th. We have a full agenda this evening, so we'll try to move things along. Has been our practice for about the last 5 years, and for our November meeting, we are having a chairman's presentation on the budget along with planning for the coming year. Then that'll be followed by a public audience, and then we'll move on to the regular Board of Finance agenda.
I just have to go back.
Unlike in past years, I'm not going to stand up and do this thing. I'm going to do it from behind here. So SCTV has assured me that they will be able to go back and forth from the screen to the presentation. Mary Ann Harris, our finance director, is going to run the projector for me. So, Mary Ann, if you would go to the agenda slide, please. Okay, as I said, what we're going to do this evening is go through the current review of the financials, and this will probably take about 12 to 15 minutes, I think, to go through this. But I think it is informative for everybody to see, where we are, what's our current budget situation look like, what are we contemplating for 2014, 2015 as we enter into the budget season, along with having the opportunity for the public to make some comments regarding the budgets, and the board. It's an opportunity for the board to just sit here and listen to what the comments are from the public. So the next slide will show what the budget schedule is. We have a budget procedure that's outlined by the town charter, and I may say the new town charter that we're operating under. So we've got some new dates as we move forward. The operating budgets and capital budgets, the process officially begins on January 31st, but we do have additional we have discussions initially with the boards on some of these issues. And the process does run through May, when we do have an automatic referendum. And I think that's a key point, that the voters of Simsbury are involved in this process, and ultimately they have the final say. One thing I must say, though, it's usually disappointing to the elected officials that the voter turnout is so low in May. And I guess that's either a sign of apathy, or it's a sign that everybody's very happy with what we're doing in the budgets that are being presented. On the next slide, this is just a quick overview. Oh, and Marianne, actually going to back up a little bit. There we go. The role of the Board of Finance with the elected oversight board. We work to balance the expenditures and the revenues. The authority for the board comes from two places, from Connecticut General Statutes. It also comes from the town charter. We do hold a number of public hearings during the budget season where we do get input from the public as well. We approve the operating and the capital budgets. We then submit, this is an older slide. We used to have a town meeting. We don't have a town meeting anymore. The last public hearing is actually a Board of Finance public hearing before it goes on to the referendum. And then the Board of Finance does set the mill rate. We don't do that in isolation, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in a slide. So, Marianne, if you would go to the next slide, please. Here's the financial indicators for the town of Simsbury at the moment. We have general reserves of $9.6 million. That number is a little bit fluid as we, add money into it. That comes from various sources, but the board generally tries to keep that number at above 10% of our operating budgets. We have a bond rating from Moody's, which is the highest that you can get, which is AAA, and that results from the conservative fiscal practices of the Board of Finance, along with cooperation of the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education. The benefit for that, for the the residents of Simsbury, the taxpayers of Simsbury, is that it provides us with the lowest possible interest rate costs when we do go out to bond. I will, before I get on to the debt service, just touch on some of the fiscal practices that go in to make up having such a very attractive rating from Moody's, and that is adherence to the debt policy that the Board of Finance has established, which primarily says 7% of our operating budgets will be used for principal and interest. It also is the result of strong financial reserves, which in part are because of our conservative collection rate that we use, which is at 98%. We collect at a 98% rate, and that provides us with a strong reserve, which we can use not only for when things happen like Storm Alfred, and we need to quickly pull out $3 million or $3.5 million for storm relief, but it also, the rating agencies also find that very attractive. We adhere to a CNR policy, which is our capital non-reoccurring, which provides a steady stream of non-capital to the various boards. We also, and this is cited by Moody's, we are one of the few towns in the state of Connecticut that has the use of OPEB reserve funds. OPEB is other post-employment benefits, and that creating that fund was driven primarily by the Board of Finance and primarily by Peter Askham, along with Kevin North and Nick Mason, who are on the board to make sure that that happened. We've also done pension strengthening and worked very hard over the last couple of years to make sure that the interest rate assumption was pushed down. I think at one point it was 8.5%. It's now down to 7%, and I believe it'll probably go even lower in the coming years. Finally, we've been working, and this was cited by Moody's, we've been working to hold down expenses, and particularly in a era of negative or reduced grand list growth. So that environment to get a Moody's AAA rate, I think, is something that the town can be proud of. Now, moving on to debt service. We have, Marianne, if you could back up a little bit, please. Sorry, we have roughly $50 million of outstanding debt. This is made up primarily of $31 million of general obligation bonds, almost $32 million of general obligation bonds. Most of those are 10-year bonds, with the exception of the high school, which was a 15-year bond. We also have $18 million from the loan for the sewer treatment plant when we did the modernization and expansion of that plant. And then there's a just about $100,000 1% loan on from a housing loan. So those are the financial indicators at the moment for the town. The following slide just shows you the debt service over the last 10 years and where those have come from. Both the Board of Education and the town, the town being in blue and the Board of Education being in the red. The number that's driving that in the 2005, 2006, 2007 is primarily the result of the high school, which was approximately a $34 million project. All right, Marianne, if you go to the next slide. Here's the current budget situations that you have. Going the Board of Selectmen, debt retirement, Board of Ed, non-public schools, and total expenditures. We have, going from left to right, we have the current budget for fiscal year 2013-2014, roughly $90 million, $18.3 million from the Board of Selectmen, debt retirement at $6.2 million, Board of Education at $64.9 million, non-public schools at about $500,000 for a total of $90 million. That's an increase from the prior year of $88.3 million. And as you can see, it was a net change of $1.7 million roughly, with the Board of Selectmen having a increase of 1.71%, debt retirement at 3.32, Board of Ed at 1.89, non-public schools at 0.5%, and total expenditures that went up at 1.98%. As you can see, the numbers are favorable from that standpoint as far as trying to keep those numbers at or below inflation.
I think it was 1.94%.
Oh, 1.94, sorry. If I said something different, I apologize. Okay, moving on to the next slide. It shows you where the expenditures are. The Board of Education is the bulk of that at $64 million. The next driver is the Board of Selectmen at 18.3, making up 20% of the budget. Debt retirement is at 7%, and as I stated earlier, that's a mixture of both Board of Education and Board of Selectmen projects. So that shows you what the big drivers are from a macro level, which is primarily where the Board of Finance typically operates, is at a macro level as much as possible. Going on to the next slide, what we show is what are the revenue sources? Where is the revenue coming from? Comes from property taxes, comes from state aid, comes from investment income, and then other revenue, which could be everything from building permits to marriage licenses to dog fees to a whole bunch of other things that come in to us. And these property taxes are all residential, motor vehicles, commercial, industrial, and personal property. But, the big driver there obviously is the property taxes, and that gets the most discussions, obviously. Now, where do these revenues come from? Let's go to the next slide, Mary Ann. They come from property taxes, state aid, investment income, and others. So this shows it on a pie chart basis. If we go to the next slide, it shows the property tax source. Okay, 76% of our property taxes come from residents. 12.4 comes from commercial, 8.1 comes from motor vehicle, and personal property is at 7%. Personal property mostly is commercial, but it's things that are in the buildings themselves, like computers, desks, file cabinets, those types of things. So this gives you a graphic display of where the property taxes come from. If we go on to the next slide, it just briefly shows where the dependents that we have on property taxes. In 1980, we had 75.4% of our taxes or our source came from property taxes. Last year, or 2010, it was 90.2. And that's a function of state aid as well as somewhat from our investment income, which I'll touch on in a little bit. The next slide just shows you a little bit of the grand list and where that's gone. You'll see a spike there from 2007 to 2008 when we had a reevaluation. So that jumped up the grand list. If you go to the 2011, 2012, you'll see a drop in the grand list, and again, that was reevaluation. But unfortunately, that reflected a lot of various things, including what happened to the economy, and so that number went the wrong way. Typically, it would go the other way, but it dropped down. So I don't want to dwell on that one. Actually, Mary Ann, we're going to skip over the slide 14. I don't think that really provides much more. Let's go to the current mill rate. The current mill rate is 37.29 mills. along with the fire district at 1.22 mils, for a total mill rate of 38.51. As I said earlier, the Board of Finance sets the mill rate. The Board of Finance, however, does not do that in isolation. There's many factors that go into that, many of them that are outside of our control, but nevertheless, we have to deal with them. If we go to the next slide, this really shows.
Paul, could I just, a quick question for the mill rate? The fire district, though,
They set their own.
sets its own mill rate, correct?
The mill rate is set by the fire district on their own. And I'm glad you brought that up, Jeff, because by having the fire district having the ability to be their own taxing authority, what that does is it allows the fire district to not get involved in the general budget and have to fight with other town segments or units for things like trucks or for equipment. It's a steady flow, and it has allowed the fire district to have one of the best districts in the state, and also pay cash for a lot of their purchases. The benefit to the Simsbury residents of that is by having that type of equipment, we are able to take benefit in our insurance rates. People don't know that, but we are dependent oftentimes, especially in the commercial, on what type of fire district you have. I know that from the business that I'm in the insurance, but not many people know that. Okay, if we go on to the next, the mill rate formula, this is what drives the mill rate. It's expenditures, it's other revenues, it's property taxes that need to be collected, it's the tax collection rate, and those are the items on the numerator. Below that, in the denominator, is the property tax grand list. That drives it. So well, let me rephrase that. It's one of the factors, it's one of the major factors, along with what are the expenditures. Right now, we have roughly $90 million of expenditures. We have $7.8 million of other revenues, state revenues, the revenues that I said previously, and then filling that in that's what we need to collect for property taxes. So it's a mathematical equation that works. And that sets that mill rate at 37.29. Actually, 37.29, sorry. Exclusive of the fire district. Our grand list right now is roughly $2.2 billion, okay? Healthy amount, but it's something that if we get more grand list growth, then that offsets what we can do on expenditures. The problem over the last number of years, it's almost been a one-on-one. So for every dollar of increase of expenditures, we've had one more dollar of taxes. So that's not always been the case over my 18 years, but it's a fact of life we've had to deal with, and I think we've done a good job of managing that. Okay, the next item is just the mill rate. One mill rate produces $1 for each $1,000 of property value. If your house has a valuation of $186,000, which is a 70% number, your taxes are calculated as follows. $186,000 divided by 1,000 times 38.51 equals 7,163. So that's how that works. That number, by the way, does include the fire district. Okay, now let's move on. The 10-year mill rate. This is a shocking slide, but I will say the last year is unadjusted for the reevaluation. If it had been adjusted for the reevaluation, that would be down. I believe the number was, when we did this in May, was like 1.5%, something like that, if we had adjusted it. But it shows pretty much, I think it's a pretty good display, shows what we've been trying to do, particularly in the last 5 or 6 years with respect to the economic environment that we've had, and where what we've been doing with the mill rate. And again, all these have been approved by the voters. Mary, if you go to the next slide, this is the 5 and 10-year mill rate growth. just shows what we have, and again, 4% over 10 years, 5%, again, that was an unadjusted number, correct, Mary Ann?
That's the number, yeah.
That was an unadjusted number, okay? So again, over the next 5 years, it'll smooth itself out. Okay, let's go on to planning for 2014. Here are some things that I put in, and I'm sure the other members might have some comments on these as well at public audience, but I think we continue to have a sluggish economy. It's a national thing. It's also a Connecticut, particularly in Connecticut and in the Northeast. We just don't have the booming economy that places like North Carolina have, Texas, even Florida. We just don't have it. Revenue estimates. We always have to look at what we think the revenue estimates might be, and it's not a particularly rosy picture, particularly with respect to investment income. 5 years ago, or maybe what was it, Peter, 6 years ago, we had $1.2 million of investment income. Last year, we budgeted $25,000 of investment income. It affects us all from our own personal bank accounts, our corporate bank accounts, and as well from the town. The community needs. What are the community needs that we have out there, both from the standpoint of balancing it from the seniors, our business community, both from the large corporations and the small businesses? What about our students, our homeowners? All of those things are things we factor in. Educational needs. What do we have from an educational standpoint? What is it we need? Later on in the meeting, we'll talk a little bit more about capital and what happens. Our pension obligations. We've been working hard to deal with the things that are in our control over the pensions and working with the investment rate return. I know both boards, Board of Selectmen and Board of Education, have been working hard to adjust their pension plans, moving from defined benefit plans over to defined contribution plans. So it all comes together. It's all, how you work regarding your pension obligations. But by the same token, we want to make sure that we meet the obligations that we've already made to our employees and our retirees so that they are there and meet our commitments. Next thing is salary and benefits. Every organization has to deal with salary and benefits. Next item is Social Security COLA. Where does that go? What do our seniors who are on Social Security, what are they expecting for the following year? How does that factor into our budgeting? Next item, I've harped on this enough, I think, is the grand list growth. And we work closely with David Gardner at the beginning of the budget year to get estimates. Where are we going? What's happening? And what do we do there? Current debt. What do we have for current debt? As I said earlier, the board works very hard to maintain our debt policy and keep our debt, our principal and interest, at or below 7%. And finally, what's the tax impact? What is the capacity of the community to afford the budgets that we bring forward to them for the automatic referendum? Weighs heavily on all of our minds as we move forward towards May. Okay. Next item, and this is one of the final ones, is I'll wrap it up and we get the public audience. What are the challenges? The challenges for the coming budget year will be grand list, the Hartford, economic conditions, the continued low interest rate environment. Don't see any changes there. The impact on our budgets regarding the health care costs or the Affordable Care Act. And capital requests for 2015. And what I mean by 2015, anything we approve in 2014 doesn't have impact till 2015 or beyond. Okay. And in final closing, I just want to thank those of you who are in the audience for attending, and also for those watching at home on SCTV for watching this. Your involvement is very important as we go through the budget season. Everyone has a stake in this process. Watch for important budget dates regarding public hearings as they come up. You can also review the financials. The Board of Selectmen does a very good job of getting the financials out on the Simsbury website. And also, if you want to contact the Board of Finance, our address is finance1@simsbury-ct.gov. So with that, I probably ran a little bit longer than I anticipated, but now we're going to open it up to comments from the public. I'd ask you to, just state your name, what your address is for Leslie, our clerk, and if you would, keep your comments to 3 minutes, if you would. So, Mrs. Coe, would you like to speak first?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Joan Coe, 26 Wickham Drive. I am concerned that this board did not advertise the public audience in the Board of Finance agenda tonight. Was included to receive comments from the public prior to the budget process. Input from the public is a very important part of the budget process, and placing a nondescript public audience doesn't alert the public to the process. The Board of Finance should be aware that the Social Security cost of living increase is 1.5%. This is a major indicator for budgeting. Our budget should reflect that the Hartford, our highest taxpayer, is no longer going to maintain their presence in town, leaving the grand list lower by over $1.7 million. The state is showing a deficit in revenue, and the home values have decreased with the last revaluation. These are serious economic indicators. The mill rate in Simsbury is higher than the surrounding towns, leaving many people deciding to purchase homes in adjoining towns with education equal to or better than Simsbury. Not only is Simsbury geographically undesirable and not in close proximity to highways, but has a high tax rate, we cannot compete with surrounding towns. Economic development is a challenge. Since the Board of Education is projecting a decline in enrollment, their budget should reflect the losses by reconfiguring the schools to adjust to the lower enrollment. I would suggest that we have a school with pre-kindergarten to second grade. Schools should be reconfigured as the enrollment decreases, with long-term projects of a school, with the long-term projection of a school closing. With decreasing enrollment, the administrative staff should be reduced. The board should reject the 2.25% salary increase for the Board of Education administrative staff. This is inconsistent with all economic indicators. The Board of Finance should not increase our long-term debt by approving new projects that would require high overhead expenses for bonding. The Board of Finance should not use the general fund to pay for shortfalls in the pension fund or to pay for other projects after the budget is approved. The general fund should be used for catastrophic events, not for offline budgeting. The golf course is losing money and is not self-sustaining. Many towns have contracted out their golf courses so the taxpayers would not have the burden to pay for the majority of non-residents using the golf course. The Performing Arts Commission has produced a budget without adding any imputed costs for the time spent for the Public Works Department, Recreation Department, Finance Department, and administrative staff. The cost for time from the employees should be reflected in the budget. This process has been instituted with the WPCA. The town's charter now has a first selectman with greatly reduced responsibilities. The six-figure salary should be reduced to reflect the diminished responsibilities. The taxpayer should not support Main Street Partnership, a nonprofit organization, or other nonprofit organizations. It is alleged that the town did not receive any applications for finance director. Sean Kimball does not have the qualifications for the position. By placing Sean Kimball in the position of finance director, we are taking the town's risk manager and adding more risk to our financial management. Why is nobody interested in becoming Simsbury's finance director? If the town does not fill the position with a qualified finance director, the town could suffer serious risks. First Selectman Mary Glassman stated that the town is evolving towards a professional town manager. The time is now. Thank you for listening. Appreciate it. And I will post my comments on Simsbury.com and the Simsbury patch so you can review it on a regular basis.
I will do that. Thank you.
Bedtime stories.
Anybody else like to speak? Mr. Gauchman, Mr. Rinaldi? Dr. Rinaldi?
Right.
I'm sorry, was your first name?
My name is Michael Rinaldi. Dr. Pinnacle Dr. Michael Rinaldi. I'd like to make one statement, and I have 100 questions, and I will not use them. The statement I'd like to make is to the board, chairman of the Board of Finance. I want to tell you and all the people that I know, I want to congratulate you on the great job you've done over the past 16 years. Although we may not have agreed on many of the things, still, I think you've done a fantastic job and you deserve a lot of credit. I have one question, and the question is based on philosophy of this board. Over the past 10 years, we know what has been done. We know why it was done. We know when it was done. It could have been tremendous relief in the taxes to the people of this community, but it wasn't done. But the question is, ongoing for the next budget cycle, what is the philosophy of this board, given the upcoming circumstances of limited town growth as far as taxable growth, and the fact that we have a Board of Education where not one member is here tonight. Superintendent of schools is not here tonight. The business manager comes. That's not enough. That's not enough. The Board of Education has not been present the past 10 years. For whatever reason, they very seldom come to these meetings. They send a business manager. That's not enough. And they are responsible for about 80% of the taxable rate of this town. It seems inconceivable that they wouldn't show up. The second thing is, I agree with Mrs. Coe. This hearing was not publicized. If I didn't get a call from somebody of administration, somebody in one of you guys, if I didn't get a call, I wouldn't have been here tonight. There was no way to know this. So I think that the philosophy of this board has to change. Now, whether it will or not, we'll see. But the fact is that we have to experience a stabilization of this taxable rate in Simsbury. There's an opportunity for it. We know where it is. And the question is, does anybody on this board believe it can be done? So my question is, in this coming year, do you expect an increase in the tax rate?
Anybody want to tackle that question?
Sure, just one
Jeff, go ahead.
question.
Dr. Rinaldi, thank you.
Which
And
is,
thank you for your earlier comments, by the way.
Am I incorrect? We've had two speakers now mention that the public hearing was not publicized. And I thought the agendas were posted both online, here at Town Hall, etc. Which clearly that's a public audience. Did that occur?
Yep.
That's what we're doing.
It did. So there was public notification.
Right.
There was no way for me to know it.
You don't look at the agendas?
I didn't get any information. I didn't see it. I usually get blurbs from the town that tells me when their meetings are being held. I didn't get one.
Is that an automated service? That's something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jeff, whether this has been well publicized or not, I think the real answer is, obviously, we can do better. We all have known about it. As Paul said earlier in his discussion, for about 5 years now, we've been holding a public audience in November. What we have not done is we have not held regular public audiences that the public can count on. We do them, and we have, 2 in March typically, and we do this one in November, but we typically haven't done more than that. Other than putting it on our schedule, we've all got the date schedule. We haven't been publicizing it on SCTV. I'm not sure, Dr. Rinaldi, how what other ways we could do it to be more effective, but quite frankly, I think it's a communications issue.
I also think that,
Fair point.
primarily that even if we, put one in everybody's mailbox, we would still have the same number of people in the
Have a news
public, in
release.
the audience. I mean, it's just, look at when we have the public hearings, how many people show up? 15? I mean, that's it. So, really, Dr. Rinaldi, that gets back to your question of what's the philosophy, what do we think is going to happen to the taxes? It depends upon where the expenditures fall. Did we have any grand list growth? What do we expect for state aid, which I think is fairly locked in for next year, because it's a 2-year budget. But again, you never know. So as you go through the process, it's too early to say in November what's going to happen. I mean, it'd be easy to say, obviously, my words don't really matter because I'm not here after 7:30 tonight. But it's what is going to happen based upon the Board of Selectmen budget, the Board of Education budget. What is the Board of Ed going to need as far as special ed? How many kids have moved in recently to the school with special needs? I know that number has gone up more than people would know, and it's not really all that public. But so all those types of things all add up. So Peter,
Aren't you concerned, though, that not one of the Board of Education members is here tonight?
not really, and the reason is because we don't go to their meetings. If there's an issue that's on the agenda that dictates them being here, they show up. Matt Curtis will come, particularly when it's around key items on the budget or something that's on the agenda. He'll come. Mary's the same way. I mean, she comes to the meetings. She's a de facto member of the Board of Finance. But
Whoa, that's
you know?
interesting.
well, that's by charter.
You don't
That's
get
by
to
charter.
vote.
You don't get to vote though. And that's the. Don't get too.
I just want to make sure the
That's
clerk
because
has it in the
that's because
minutes,
it's the
that's all.
charter. The charter says that, regardless of who it is. But so anyway, Peter, go ahead.
Well, I think an answer to his question is, I think we're at a crossroads. And, you can't just look at the tax rate in the 1 year cycle. We have to look long-term, what goals we're trying to do. And I think we have to reassess our goals as to what we're trying to do. I mean, we seem to have a trend of the town's pretty much built out. Grand list growth will probably be up slightly the next few years, if at all. And the enrollment, based on the numbers we've been given, is in a decline, so substantial decline. So I know there's been a committee where they've studied what they want to do with the building. So now, probably the time that we're going to need some action on that. Also, the Board of Ed, long-term, we're going to have to probably give them direction. Probably our board will have to talk about it, to say, where do you envision yourself 5 years from now? I mean, because the school system, if you chip away 1 year at a time, you might not get to where you want to be if you set a goal and objective. So I think now is probably a good time to do a long-range plan. We've kind of always had one, but I think now is a better time to do a formal plan, where you actually get the three boards sitting down and just take a good objective look at this town and see where we're going to be. And then ask ourselves a lot of serious questions. How do we want to deliver the services at the most affordable cost for where we're going to be? Now, that's theoretical where you want to get to. Now, getting there is now year by year. You have to manage to that. So that's, so I think we have to get ourselves a strategic objective to where it's going to be, because I think it's pretty clear what's going to happen, or clearer what's going to happen in this town. And I don't see the economy changing. There's any magic bullet where interest rates or anything's going to find us $1 million, in our budget like we've had in the past. I don't see that. So I think we have to be realistic and ask some hard questions and hard choices. So that's what I say.
Jeff.
I would add is that I don't come at this with the premise that our sole function here is to maintain the lowest possible tax rate that possibly could be maintained for subsistence level. There are many balancing acts that need to be performed throughout town, and certainly that's a competing priority. I mean, there are people on fixed incomes. We recognize that. There is the tax program that we do have for people in financial need. But beyond that, clearly, it's something that's front and center in our mind when we make decisions. We're cognizant of that, but also front and center in our mind are the needs of those who are served through our social service program, and the needs of our students, and the need to have roads that are well paved and well managed. I could go on and on, but there are elected officials beyond the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Education is in fact elected as well, even though the process is a little different than for the other boards. And there's a lot of balancing of competing interests that happen throughout the course of the year. And, we've got a great library. It's one of the best towns in America in which to live. Our schools are highly rated. Our fire department is highly rated. I could go on and on. Our police department, highly rated. It's a great place to live. Do we have the lowest tax rate? No. Do we compare favorably, though, with other towns that are also great places to live? I would suggest yes.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? Hold on one second, if you would. Anybody else want to comment? No, we're all set? Okay. Mr. Kalishman.
Robert Kalishman, Simsbury.
Spell the last name for me?
Kalechman. One round for effect. Thank you for allowing me to address the board. Before I get into it, I sat here and I listened, and I respect Dr. Rinaldi and his comments, but the exchange as to whether or not people were notified to a meeting is non-germane as far as I'm concerned. What we should be talking about are the taxes, which are too high. To have a member of the board sit on the board and say, high taxes are good because we have the best this, the best that, and the best whatever.
All due respect,
That's,
what I said. So don't
I'm speaking,
mischaracterize my words.
I'm speaking,
Don't
sir.
mischaracterize
Jeff,
my words.
I'm speaking, sir.
Let's give him his...
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
would
Yeah.
you abide by the rules of
Go
your
ahead.
committee? For him to say that, in other words, he's justifying a high tax. His job, in my opinion, is to get the lowest tax going. The people are paying too much tax. It's obvious they're paying too much tax. If we have money, if we're worrying about we don't have enough money to invest, that tells me one thing. We're taxing too much, because if we're taking money from the people who own property to invest it, what are we doing? It's their money. Let them keep the money. Why should we take their money, lower the taxes, and not invest any money, and just keep everything where it should be? You provide a good education, and we have people that differ on education principles. Some are of the opinion that if you go out and pay high prices for good teachers, you're going to get good education. Others are the opinion that the education should develop and start in the home and move right along. And the parents that are diligent usually have the children that are the brightest. The parents that are working and don't have the background, they're usually average children. So getting back to the education, he's right as far as when he talks numbers, he's right. But when he's talking about communications, that's not your job. And there's a couple items. I was carried away, but I have two questions. My first question is public audience. Now, I know I read it says public hearing and people speak at the public hearing, but public audience is public audience, public hearing is public hearing, public. And my thinking is that if the Board of Selectmen can have public audience at every meeting, it's true democracy, in my opinion. There's no reason why this board can't have public audience each and every meeting, rather than wait till they decide they're going to let the public speak. And maybe if you have public audience, maybe the people will attend regularly, and maybe people, when it's announced that you're having a meeting, will say, oh, I'll go and I'll be able to speak. But to go to a meeting and not be able to have any input, maybe the people just figure, why waste our time? And the second question I have, that if you could answer for me, would be, I understand, I hear rumors about bonding. I hear rumors afoot that rather than raise the taxes, what's afoot now is the new economics is, why raise the taxes? Let's just go out and bond. Well, when you do that, in my opinion, the calling, someday you got to put it off on the people who are going to pay the bonds, and when they start paying the bonds, the taxes are going to go up. So if you don't tax this year, and a new administration comes in next year, and they get caught with the bonds that are due, where are they going to get the money? They have to raise the taxes. So this bonding is not the answer, in my opinion. And I go through and I notice the Board of Selectmen, and the first select woman is here this evening, and I notice their budget. It's too high. It's too high. We have so many frivolous things. You know, and I'm a benevolent person, but so many frivolous things. How can you go? We have the November stroll, whereas the town's the backup. If things go wrong there, the town has to come up with the money. And good thing you have the emergency fund you were mentioning to us about, because if you have to dip into it, at least you have the funds. You don't have to go out and borrow the money. Secondly, we have the affair up in Terriffill, the rafters or whatever. And we have, it's my opinion, I haven't really talked to Jerry Tona in depth, but it's my opinion, our Parks and Recreation Department has the biggest, must have the biggest budget in town. The golf course, the performing arts, and now he's going to get the, maybe Miss Schofield can help me, the triathlon that we're going to have. They're attempting to raise private funds, but if they can't, who picks up the bill? The finance department. And you just can't do all these things. And that's what, you know, and finally, your prime interest here are the citizens and the taxes. The taxes are too high. And this panacea that I've heard locally, I've heard it so many times in government, where the rescue in West Hartford, they got away with it. They would get away with it they got away with it for years and years and years. And the panacea was that the commercial tax base is going to create all the income, and the residential taxes will go down. And this is the same thing that's peddled in Simsbury. Time and time again, oh, we're going to raise, and we're getting just the opposite. We're telling everybody we're going to lower the residential taxes, and if this Hartford moves out, those taxes are going to go up unless you sit here and you do your job and you don't say, well, we need the best this and the best that, because you're going to have to really start cutting people. And politically, it's really going to come to...
Mr. Cashman, if you would just summarize, please.
Well, in summarizing, I think you're relying too much on state aid. It's not going to appear. And the other thing, being an insurance executive, Why is it that we have to buy insurance from a private company? Why don't we insure ourselves like other communities do?
Okay, I'll answer that one. All right, thank you, Mr. Kalishman.
Thank you for your time.
Members want to address any items for Mr. Kalishman?
Are you going to talk about health insurance?
Yeah, we'll talk about some of those. Okay, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, with all due respect, I appreciate your comments, but I disagree that our mission is to get the lowest tax rate possible. I
Wish I had
think
some more
it's
gold for
very
that.
important to hear your perspective. It is certainly an important consideration to exercise financial discipline, but this is also a town of many interests and many people with many different needs, and our job is to balance those needs and do the best that we can do representing as many people as possible in town, not a very small majority of people who may show up to a meeting in a public audience and criticize and provide, essentially negative comments without viable solutions for how you address community-wide need, and not just the needs of a few.
I'd like to hear from the members, if you don't mind.
If I could
Peter.
also correct.
Jeff,
just
sorry, I
one
thought you were done.
One other item, which was, I think, in Joan Coe's presentation, he talked about loss of revenue of $1.7 million. My recollection last I looked was that they had been, from a personal property perspective, significantly reducing the amounts they've paid over the years because they've not invested in new technology. So I thought that number was down, correct me if I'm wrong, to way below 1.7 million. And whether they move out or remain does not constitute a loss of the 1.1 million in revenue, if my memory is correct, on what they pay in real property
But
taxes.
Joan, if you would, we'll get the
Okay.
right number.
So the real property taxes, they will continue to pay, whether they are in town or not. The personal property tax, if they move all their personal property out of town, I think that's $300,000 or $400,000. I'm not saying this isn't important stuff, but I just think it's alarming to have that kind of information put forth on a public record when this is on SCTV, and it unduly alarms people who may be listening. And then I just disagree as well with some of the other comments about average children and people who are more well-to-do, have kids who are going to perform at a higher rate and what have you. I think, again, that's not accurate. And it's certainly not the kind of perception that I want listening viewers to take away from this meeting.
Okay. Peter?
Just a question on bonding. I mean, what our policy's been in bonding is when we approve projects, we bond them right away. As soon as we spend the money, we bond them or need the money. So, and we do a 10-year bond, so we do make everyone pay for it right away. We try not to defer and make another generation pay. And we do 10-year bonds, which means that if you want the project,
you're going to pay for it.
You're going to pay for it, so you can't just have it in here and then move out, so to speak, and leave the tab with someone else. So that's why the 10-year bonding has always been there, and I think it's worked well. We stretched it out once for the high school because it was very expensive, and it's a once-in-a-generation type project, so we think we did a 15-year bond
15.
on that.
Could I add to that just a moment?
Well, let him finish first.
No,
This is related to this point?
More importantly, we do not bond operating expenses. And that's one of the misconceptions you have, and that's not correct.
Okay.
So we bond, we go through a thorough analysis.
Same pot, what's the difference?
Well, what we do is we have different criteria for what you can bond.
All of the people who are paying taxes.
If you would, let
Well,
Mr. Askham
we actually have
explain.
3 criteria. We have, it has to be a longer-term life asset to be bonded, and bond counsel has to agree to it. So it goes through an extensive vetting to make sure it's qualified to be bonded. We have an intermediate fund called capital non-reoccurring for, let's say, equipment-type items, which we spend, like we buy 3 buses a year. The Board of Ed, for example, buys, and in there, they take 20% of that cost and put it into their budget and effectively pay it back through their operating budget over a 5-year period. So their operating budgets are basically replacing that equipment. It's into their budget, so there's no deferral there at all. We might increase capital non-recurring occasionally, but, which gives them a little, eventually feathers it into their budget, so to speak. But And then operating, they do their operating budget. Our concern always been, our board, is to make sure there was a proper amount of capital and equipment spent, that in times of difficult budgets, people don't cut back some of the items, repairs to their buildings, equipment purchases. That's why we like to make sure there's a proper amount of capital, non-recurring, and capital being spent every year. On the Hartford, I believe we've been provided this schedule. I don't have it between personal property and the real estate, but it's down to $1,763,000. They were high at $2,784,000, so
They've been pulling that
they've
personal
been pulling out
property
for about 6 years now. So they were high at $2,784,000. They're down to $1,763,000. As my memory serves me, I believe there's $1.2 million in real estate and about 500 some odd thousand in personal property. So if they pulled everything out, they're still going to pay on the real estate unless they tear it down. So,
And then it's just the land.
so I assume that we're going to know pretty soon what the Hartford's going to do, and that's going to be probably an issue that we're going to have to deal with, or at least have a contingency plan on, just to have some what if.
In relation to what you're speaking about, the Hartford,
Pulling out their property, personal property, do you think if the taxes were lower, in other words, we lowered the taxes, not raised the taxes, and this, well, it's only 1/4%, it's only 0.5%. When you raise taxes, you raise taxes. When you lower taxes, you lower taxes, whether it's 0.5% or whatever it may be. And if you're an executive officer of a company and you see the trend is tax going up, what do? You get out from under, and that's exactly what the Hartford did. They're going to Windsor, lower taxes. They moved to other communities, all lower taxes. So you can argue all you want. My opinion is that you raise the taxes, and the thing is, you mentioned, if I have to go out and pay
Mr. Kalishman, I got the idea of your question. Let me just
If I have to pay
respond.
$50 for a gallon of gasoline, and I'm in pretty good shape financially, I'll pay the $50. If I'm not, I can't pay $50 for it. And that's all I'm trying to say to you is the fact that you're talking, well, we have people that can afford it, but you have people that can't afford it too.
I don't want to comment on what the executives at the Hartford were thinking with their, they've been a good citizen, corporate citizen over the years. The Hartford was going through some struggles. I don't want to get into what made them make that decision. I do want to touch on the last question that you asked about public audience. My philosophy as chairman for the last 15 years, which had been carried forth from other chairmen over the years, that there's no need for public audience at the Board of Finance for the following reasons. And that is that we are here primarily to make the financial decisions on requests that have come to us from the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education. Both of those boards have extensive public audience, both at the beginning of the meeting and at the end of the meeting. And therefore, all those things that come to us, for the most part, have already been vetted through the public audience process. Therefore, the Board of Finance only needs to have public audience at the public hearings. Now, we instituted 5 years ago having public audience at this November meeting so that we could have input from the public at the beginning of our meeting, or the beginning of the process. So, I mean, that's my philosophy. I think it's worked very well. And in the instances where there were significant issues, such as with the purchase of Ethel Walker, okay, or with respect to other items that might have come up, we've always opened it up to comments from the public. Also, we're in the electronic age now, okay? Earlier in my presentation, we had the email address for the Board of Finance. We're all in the phone book. Our addresses are there. Believe me, during the budget cycles over the years, we've gotten stacks of letters, particularly when we were working to cut the Board of Ed budget, when it was requested to be 11%, and we were whacking away at it. Believe me, we got plenty of letters, so we had plenty of public input as to what was going on. So, maybe the next board will decide to make changes on that. I personally think the approach that we've taken has worked very well, and that's my thought on public audience. So with that, unless anybody else wants to speak, I'm going to close that portion of it out. I appreciate everybody's input that we've had. We're going to move on to the regular items that are before us on our agenda. And thank you all, Dr. Rinaldi, Mr. Kaushman, Mrs. Coe, for your comments. And I hope Barb's feeling better. Appreciate you just making it. Okay, thank you, everybody. Okay, next item on our agenda is to approve the minutes of our September 17th regular meeting.
So moved. Second.
Okay, any changes, corrections, additions, deletions? No, all those in favor say aye.
You said September, right?
Yep, September.
Yes, September 17th,
Those are the ones we tabled last
Right.
month.
I'll abstain because I was not present.
okay?
And I was,
Okay, October 15th, regular meeting,
So moved.
Second.
any changes?
Yes.
Okay, Barb?
Just the spelling of my name.
Okay. That's right, one too many Ts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
okay.
it's right the first time, but there's a few versions of it.
Yeah, okay, all right. Would you just give that to Leslie at the end, our clerk? Okay, any other changes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, those are approved. Okay, next item on our agenda is the calendar of meetings for approval. We had at our last meeting, had made some adjustments to the calendar to reflect everybody's schedules. I'd like you to take a look at this. I've also passed this on to the new members of the Board of Finance for their review as well, and I believe it looks good for them as well. Mostly in the beginning of the year up to the June 17th meeting, and then after that, we just follow the regular schedule.
have we resolved the March 25th room conflict situation?
That's been resolved?
They've moved.
Okay, they're moved?
The land use commission.
Okay,
Can I just ask a question?
sure.
When do we have to do that? Is it this
Today.
time? This is the latest
This
we
is
can do it? We
the-
can't do it for regular next month?
No, we got to do it today.
We need to post it.
Yeah, we've got to post it. What's that?
We could do it next month, can't we?
No, you really got to.
We've got the December meeting already scheduled.
You really got to get this moved, Nick. That's why we asked everybody to look at the schedule.
I have no problem.
No, it's not that I'm not ready. I was just thinking with two new members, I wanted to make
Well, I
sure.
did run it by them. So, Linda, you did get a copy of the schedule? Sorry, you got a copy of the schedule, right? Okay, great. And I know Maura got it as well and said it was fine with her as
And
well.
the only difficulty I have with the schedule is next month, and that's not on this schedule.
I move adoption
They're gonna
of
miss you.
2014 calendar.
Yeah,
All right, do I have a second?
I second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
December? We got to-
Him.
Okay.
No, if I had my druthers, we would change the date next month.
You got a party to go to?
Yeah.
And we're not
At least you're
invited?
honest about it. They'll get over it without you being
I'm
there.
sure they will.
All right, next item on our agenda is a request for approval for a special revenue fund for the triathlon. There's an item in your package regarding this. What we're doing here, actually, this letter's from Tom, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory to accept funds that come in for this Simsbury triathlon. Mary Ann or Deb or Mary, do you want to comment on this in the absence of Tom being here since he wrote this letter?
Yeah, we were approached, I think Linda Schofield is here and can answer questions, but this is an event that folks are trying to promote Simsbury. They'd like to do it all with private foundation fundraising capital. They met with town staff. Town staff thought it was a good program for the town to sponsor, which means that the town will help assist in the coordination. But again, all the budget funds will come from private donations. Similar to Simsbury Celebrates. Simsbury Celebrates is paid for completely with donations, but again, it is a town-sponsored event, which means the town does have oversight and does review it. The Board of Selectmen unanimously endorsed the program, and we are now going through the public gathering permit process.
Are we, the question did come in, if the funds don't come in, are we on the hook for expenditures?
No, it's the same thing as Simsbury Celebrates, they can only expend the money that comes in.
And this is the first year?
The dog park revenue fund was the same thing. We did agree to set up this special revenue fund, but again, the dog park volunteers could only spend what they brought in. So this is consistent with town-sponsored events that we don't budget for.
What's the date of it? When are they gonna have?
It's in May 18th.
May 18th.
There should be
Nick?
correction.
This is for 1 year?
This is for
Is this the
next
first
May.
annual, is this the first annual?
Well, we'll see how it goes, but hopefully.
I mean, is this fund good, my question, is the fund gonna be in place ad infinitum?
If it's like Simsbury Celebrates, if it's successful, probably yes. If not, we'll review it after the event to say.
Right.
So I can't answer that right now, Nick. We'll have to see how it goes.
Can I move adoption?
Second. Okay, Nick moved it, Jeff seconded it. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, next item on our agenda is Public Act number 13-60. 60, thank you. What would I do without you? Okay. No comment. All right. I talked to Burke about this issue since it does impact the Board of Education. And the way I read this, it's around spending recommendations for non-educational services and working with the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen to come up with ideas for non-educational expenses. And it really has something to do also with the timeline and making recommendations, and then if the Board of Education doesn't agree with the recommendations, that they have to give a written explanations for rejecting the recommendations. But by the same token, it doesn't require them to accept those recommendations. Also, the thing that about this act is, at least as of when we talked yesterday, and Burke, maybe you found something on here, it doesn't specifically address and define non-educational services. So that was, I think, as we go through, or as you go through in the next couple of years, we're going to have to work through exactly what this means. But Burke, I'm going to ask you to maybe just touch a little bit on it.
As Paul said, you know, there's a clearly defined dialogue here that this law, you know, is saying needs to take place. And in our town, it's between the Board of Finance and the Board of Education. But given that the topic of non-educational services and trying to find efficiencies is not something new to Simsbury, it's clear that we have to work with our town staff and our town colleagues, and that's a conversation that Mary's office and the superintendent's office has had ever since I've been here. Something that, you know, we're planning to have a more formal conversation on in the very near future. And it's something that I think we need to do probably a better job of formally documenting what is in place and keeping, you know, focus on what are some of the areas that we could try that we haven't tried yet.
Are these things like regional fuel buying programs and some of the things that we're already doing, and you're talking about, you know, we just have to formalize those a little bit more? Because I looked through some of this stuff.
The starting point is to make sure people are aware of what efficiencies and cooperation we do have. Cooperative efforts is something that we do put on our website, and the town, I think, does also. But you know, looking at other models that may be out there that we haven't tried.
Burke, it says here, it says each local Board of Education shall prepare an itemized estimate of the cost of maintenance of public schools. So you're supposed to prepare an itemized estimate of the cost of maintenance of public schools.
Because that's part of their budget.
No, they're supposed to
I don't know.
itemize it now. They have
And
to
then-
itemize it.
Right. for the ensuing year, and then shall submit said estimate to the Board of Finance in the town, having a Board of Finance, blah, 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 no later than 2 months preceding the annual meeting which appropriations are to be made. So I guess an itemized estimate has to be done on the cost of maintenance of the school, whatever that definition is. Now, I guess we have the option of accepting it, or how you're doing it, or coming back with suggestions.
Right.
I think simplistically, that's what they're trying to say. So,
I mean,
I
I've seen-
think maybe in the first year, we gotta try to define it, what it is, so we understand what the animal is, and so we can deal with it, and then, maybe it'll be more of a concept, here's what you have to look into to do these costs. If you are doing joint buying of whatever it is of maintenance type items,
Right.
and I don't know if fuel is maintenance. I don't know if that meets the definition, I'm not sure. But the definition, you have to go back and look at the legislative intent, I would assume.
Do you know if the legislature came up, was there something that happened that caused them to come up with this?
I don't know the legislative background.
I wasn't there.
I mean, the firm of Shipman and Goodwin that we use for the Board of Education on various legal updates, I mean, they do an annual update of legislation. This was just one bullet. I've not heard that the interpretation has only been to maintenance costs, or that it has been interpreted that we must submit some sort of a new list. And as I think you've pointed out, it's not defined. The understanding I had was, there is a budget, and we should be able to look at that, and if there's something that you want more information on, of course we can provide it. But as a starting point, later in this legislation, it talks about non-educational services, which certainly seems
Right.
broader than talking about just maintenance.
And those, see, the underlying,
We can debate what the intent was, but I think the practical matter is that we have cooperation on IT, and we have aspects of our financial, insurance, pension, and field maintenance. We have cooperation in a lot of different areas, and so we should be looking at all areas.
Okay, hold on, Mary wanted to have a comment. Mary, go ahead, and then I've got a comment on it as well, then Jeff, I'll get to you.
Just in response to Nick's question, I can give you the history of the legislation. It was proposed by CCM, and it was designed to, in some communities, it's very hard to know what the non-educational expenditures are because they're not line item budgets like the Board of Selectmen budgets or like council budgets. And I think many communities were having a hard time, and communities that were not cooperative already, they were having a hard time getting at some of this information. So the intent was, if the non-educational expenses, everyone understands that the educational expenses are under the purview of the Board of Ed, but the non-educational expenses, the cost of snow plowing, the cost of maintenance, if those were disclosed, that would open up some conversations about where there's some cost efficiencies and savings. So I think it's...
But couldn't you argue that everything that the Board of Ed does and everything that's in the Board of Ed education budget is at least indirectly or directly educational expenses?
No, I think that this legislation was directly targeted to all of those non-teaching of students. This was really the cost to operate a building, and I think it was left vague because obviously some communities will be forthcoming and disclose, and other communities won't. And then once we see what communities are disclosing and not, then my guess the statute will be amended next year to get at those communities that aren't disclosing. But it's very simple. It's to open up the dialogue so that if there's some efficiencies, the public knows the communities that are doing those and take credit for those. As Burke was saying, in a lot of cases we're doing things and we should be proud of them. And it's also designed to get to communities that maybe are more reluctant to disclose and hide under the umbrella that everything is educational related.
Well, if he has to comply...
Hold on a second, Peter. Jeff, did you wanted to be recognized?
Mary, I think, stated much of what I was going to say, but I took a look at the report from the Office of Legislative Research, from the Office of Fiscal Analysis. I thought it was interesting that in one place, the summary, as Mary said, was to encourage municipalities and boards of education to consider ways in which to realize financial efficiencies and to promote transparency in school budgets. But in one place, one of the reports indicated that there would be no fiscal impact. And it was labeled as a procedural change, and I thought that was curious, and I don't know whether that was intended to state there'll be no fiscal impact to the state of Connecticut more broadly, because certainly I think the expectation is that there would be hopefully some fiscal impact within the community, but I think the non-educational expenses, I looked to try to get a better sense of definition and at legislative history, I didn't see anything.
It wasn't there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's, leaves some discretion. So, I'm sorry, Peter, you want to talk, and then Kevin?
We have to get, somehow we have to get a definition. So the Board of Ed has to get a definition of what they are going to do, so we can get this information, because we have to comply. So we have to somehow get the intent of what that definition is, however, even if it's, something's better than nothing.
Will you be
That's one thing
working, will you be working with your counterparts at other schools, Burke, to figure this one out and understand what it is we're not doing, and maybe we're complying with everything we need to do, or what changes we need to make, because I'm sure that this doesn't just apply to Simsbury.
Right, it has been mentioned at meetings I've been at, but has not been the focal point yet, so.
Well, maybe you could be
I
the
expect
driver of
I
it.
expect that
Maybe
we
you
need
could
to
be the
get
driver
that-
of it.
We need to get that clarified
Okay,
very
all
soon.
right. Kevin?
Being in the commercial real estate business and reading this statute, I can't help but wonder why we don't rely on the plain meaning of the words, namely the requirement that they estimate the cost of maintenance of the public schools, period. And then let the legislature come out with further revisions to the law as it becomes more clear. The wholesale speculation, and therefore the creation of needless work, is something that the community, I think, can hardly afford at this point. It's not like we have lots of excess capacity to get this done. Providing an estimate of the cost of maintenance of public schools is a much more straightforward exercise. It doesn't say operations, it says maintenance. And then exploring areas of cooperation between Board of Selectmen expenditures for their maintenance items and Board of Education expenditures for their maintenance items seems to me is all that this requires at this point. If eventually the legislature comes back and says, no, we meant something more, then we can act accordingly.
The one question I had around this is the underlined parts of this bill indicate what was changed from a law that was already in place, correct? This isn't brand new. It says this is, the general statute is repealed and the following is substituted in lieu thereof. So aren't just the underlined pieces what's new? So the parts prior, which Kevin just cited around itemized estimate of cost of maintenance of public schools, hasn't that already been in place? And it's substituted by these new parts around the timeline, the spending recommendations, the non-educational services, what happens if it's rejected? Isn't that really the only new part? So I wouldn't think we'd have to do a whole lot of work to figure out what this is. Barbara,
I can
Mary.
just clarify, I think the point is, the Board of Ed already budgets
Right.
for these items. It's not like they need to do more work. The point is the disclosure as a separate disclosure from a general budget.
So maybe some towns weren't doing
So it
it.
has to be more like a line item. It has to be separated out so that folks can see what is the maintenance. So I think Kevin's suggestion is a good place to start. I think that there's obviously the statute tells you what has to be disclosed, and that's where we should start. And once the information is disclosed, then it opens up conversations about how to reduce those costs. I think that was the intent of the statute.
Barb.
Well, I'm more in where Kevin is right now. Their budgets are due to us on March 12th, which is 60 days before the referendum, which is May 13th. We're already doing this. We get line item level maintenance. I think all you have to do is put in subtotal maintenance on what you already do for us today, and I don't think this is new requirements or new work.
Exactly.
Okay. Jeff.
I was going to ask, I
Then Peter, you
apologize
can have the last word.
if this is reflected in the charter or somewhere else, but when you look at the non-educational expenses, to the extent that we're defining them as everything that's non-teaching related, look at buildings, for example, that currently is under the purview of the Board of Education.
And is that driven by our charter, or is that something that's just a practice that's grown up? I mean, if you think about consolidating functions, I mean, an argument could be made that you could look at having the Board of Selectmen have responsibility for all public buildings in town, and the Board of Education focusing on other certain expenses, that there is an opportunity for consolidation. But, I mean, I don't know the genesis of
I believe that's
vision.
general statute, that's Connecticut general statute, not just our charter.
Okay, so
I
it's
think that's what
required.
drives it, right.
Okay.
Yep. Peter? Okay. All right, I think we got a handle on this. We don't need to take any action on this. It was just more informational to get the dialogue going.
Where's the follow-up for this going to lie? Is it with Burke?
I think it's with Burke.
Board of Education.
Yeah. Okay, we have a couple of more items on our agenda, but we have another board coming in here in a little while. So what I'd like to make sure that we actually take care of tonight is the appointment of the acting finance director. So I'd take a motion to move that up on the agenda, please.
Second.
Second, okay. All right. As we know, Mary Ann Harris is leaving us, and Mary Ann, I want to thank you for your service as the finance director over the last I think year and a half or almost 2 years. I appreciate that. You've done a lot of good things with such as Penimation and moving us into the new age with that computer system, which was very difficult to deal with. But also, before the board, we need to make sure that we have an interim director in place. The Board of Selectmen acted the other night to appoint an interim director, which I think is a good step and needed in order to make sure that we have the appropriate signatures. I also think we need to, continue to look and make sure that we have the best available person for that job on a permanent basis. But in the meantime, we need to make sure that we take care of this. So the Board of Selectmen voted the other night to appoint Sean Kimball, the Town of Simsbury's Deputy Director of Administrative Services, as the interim director of Finance and Treasurer effective December 1st. Just one item with respect to process. The Board of Finance has the responsibility to also vote on the hiring or the termination of the finance director. So it's a dual function with the Board of Selectmen. As way of background, I have had conversations with Mr. Cook over the last month or so with respect to this appointment as director, and I think Tom also may have spoken to some of the members as well. And I believe, Mary, that Mr. Kimball's information was also made public at that meeting, and we don't need to go into executive session. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So I'll turn it over to you for a comment.
Just thank you, Paul. I too want to thank Mary Ann for her service and wish her good luck in her new adventures. And I want to thank Sean also for stepping up. And as you can see, we obviously need 2 signatures as of December 1st. We want to make sure that the town is well protected. That's why the board took up this item earlier, and we'd like the Board of Finance to consider as well. Just for the record, we have advertised for the position of Director of Finance for the town of Simsbury. We so far have received 19 applications. Just wanted to make sure that the record is clear that the position is posted, and we are seeking the best qualified candidates. We do have 19 applications, and we'll continue to advertise that until a director is selected. So, thank you.
Okay,
Happy to answer
great.
questions.
Peter?
When will we start the formal process of selecting?
So we were waiting to see if we had an adequate number of candidates, and 19 is enough to get started. So we're in the process of screening those now. We, as we have in the past, had representatives from other Director of Finances plus representation from the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen on the interview panel. So we've already started to screen those applications and are working to get a panel and some applicants ready to go.
So I mean, ballpark timeframe, we're looking December, November?
Well, we were waiting till the new elected officials are sworn in, and then we'll be consulting with the new board after the December date.
So we assume something's going to happen in December?
Yes, oh, absolutely, right after the,
Yeah.
at your next meeting, we'll have an update for you.
I mean, it's your intention to fill the position, say, by March 1st, or?
Oh, we'd like to fill it as soon as
Okay.
possible. We went through this before, and obviously we went out to advertise a second time. I don't know if that's going to be necessary this time, but, it's our hope to move as quickly as possible.
Okay, great. And the last time we did have somebody from the outside who came in and acted as finance director. He did a good job. It just took a while to understand our process. Mr. Kimball has, three years now working for the town and being involved in some of the budgeting process, and
Great that
so that's
Sean
good.
expressed an
Yep.
interest, and we reviewed his background. He has a master's, as you know, and
Mhm.
he has been involved in the budgeting process, and we're thrilled that he's taking on these responsibilities. We are going to backfill Sean's position, so he will not be performing two tasks at the same time. We want to make sure he succeeds, and so we'll be backfilling with the risk management position with a temporary person. We're in the process of looking for someone now, so that.
And he did serve in other communities in the Office of Management and Budget, for the record, so.
The point I was going to make.
Kevin?
I'll make a motion that we appoint Sean Kimball as the interim director of finance and treasurer for the town of Simsbury.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Congratulations. Congratulations to both of you. Okay, next item on our agenda was capital and projects to bond. Really, I have these on the thing, and given the time and the fact that there's another board standing outside, I don't know if the board really wants to get into a lengthy discussion on the 6-year capital project or process, or if you want to just take this as information and digest it and use that for your December meeting. Kind of get a nodding of the heads, so, okay. All right, we'll do that. Well, I'm not yet. Next item on our agenda is correspondence. I do have an item here of correspondence regarding a seminar, and this is for all members, but also maybe for the new members as well. CCM has a leadership training seminar that is for newly elected members of boards of finance and other local officials. It's on Thursday, December 12th at the Cromwell Plaza or the Crown Plaza, in Cromwell, from 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. And I've got that information. I'll share that with you if anybody wants that. Next, Peter, you wanted to make a comment, so go ahead.
Yes, I'd just like to thank both you, Paul, and Kevin for all your years of service. I know, Paul, you've been on 18 years.
18.
I've been with you 17 of those.
Yeah.
You've been chair 15, Kevin, 12 years. I'd like to thank you on behalf of the board and the town for great service. I think it's been a great experience for our board to have your expertise. I sincerely think the town is better off financially as a result of your service. I just started jotting down issues that we've gone through and policies that we've made. We come up with a reserve policy. We have 11+% reserves. I think you've left the town pretty well off. We obtained AAA bond rating, which that's something we've all been striving for, and we finally got it. That was pretty amazing. We, believe it or not, set up an OPEB fund out of the blue. We had that requirement. We put that in. We're probably the leader in that. As far as the town, you led the charge there. Kevin always wants full financial reporting on employee costs. So that was easy for him to get on board with that. So you did a great job leading us through that. Took 3 boards to get together, digest it in the budget. That was an amazing process. We've rebuilt about everything we could rebuild in this town. I think we went through all the schools when the enrollment increased. We've rebuilt every school, with the high school being the greatest challenge because it was a larger cost than we figured, and it almost became a whole new school, but I think we managed that process to a more reasonable solution for everyone.
Came in under budget.
Came in under budget. We didn't allow the scope creep. We made sure we supervised that. Also, we complied with our debt policy, which was amazing that we could do all that. And we're about to be out from under that bond shortly, so it'll be interesting to see what we choose to do after we get out from that bond.
Rebuild what we rebuilt.
Yeah. Well, Simsbury Farms, we've totally redone Simsbury Farms up there. We have state-of-the-art facilities, recreation. The sewer plant was, we complied, got on it early. The library, even though not everyone agreed, but we got the library through, got it through. The town hall, renovation, performing arts. We've purchased land. Now, some of that land was an issue, but financially, I think our board did a very good job of doing its job and making it financially digestible, affordable for the town the way we did it. Pension investment rates, we've been talking about that since Mr. North's been on, and even though we don't have it quite to the level he wants, I think we got it to a better level.
You mean as low as I want?
No, he wants it to 6, but we got the 7.
6, he wants it at 4.
The assumption.
I think we're better off than most towns. I think we're more conservative than most towns, so I think that's something, that's hard to do, and I think you've done a great job leading us through that. School buses, we got capital and non-recurring, kind of smoothed out budget items. That was way back when. We did that instead of just bonding for buying all the buses. We kind of smoothed it. Maybe we have some work to do on the roads, but, we can go follow that concept. The athletic field, we actually approved the athletic field with lights. Our board put the lights in, and which caused a little stir in the town. And but we got it through, and I think we have a field to be proud of. Now I see they want to redo it. We'll see about that. Also, as far as big picture control of the budget, Kevin, you kind of brought, let's not micromanage and get into everyone's little business, but let's set concepts, guidelines. I think we've learned how to do the big picture control of the budget, and I think that's been good for the town. We've brought professional investment advisors through your guidance to the pension and OPEB funds, where we can feel better about, we might not be able to change the investment climate, but at least we can feel a little better about, we understand it. We also survived many stressful financial situations by having financial flexibility. Storm Alfred, 2 years ago, that was a devastating storm. I thought, you led us through that with Mary and Tom Roy. We did a great job there. We survived Storm Alfred financially. It was quite and we still have, I guess, pieces of it hitting this year. School enrollment increases was interesting going up. Now it's going down, so it's going to be interesting to see how we deal with that. Total cost of the high school and the debt. Financial meltdown with the interest income going from $1.2 million to $25,000. That's been interesting. The Hartford leaving, that's the current situation. So here we are all over again with a potential $1.7 million walking out the door. So we have to deal with that. We funded the town's OPEB. Grand list growth has been down. But we've somehow survived it by having good financial stability and strength, and that's all to the two of you. I know it's been a privilege to serve with you, and I think we're going to miss you. I know I will miss you in your financial guidance, but I insist that both of you make yourselves available for consultations. Because as you can hear by Mr. North...
Except we get to charge now.
I didn't say we're going to pay you, but sometimes, Kevin, you have a way of getting the simple solution, so we appreciate it.
All right, well, thank you, Peter. Thank you.
I just want to echo
Close it up.
thank you. You both bring great skill sets to this board, and you will be missed. I know Paul's leadership has made us work together. It's a nonpartisan board, and it's been terrific to operate that way. And I know Kevin's expertise in the market and dedication to making sure that we do things right with all disclosures has really helped make us more transparent to the taxpayers. So thank you both. We'll miss you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes the business for the board, and I will take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second, all those in favor say aye. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for the kind words. Appreciate that. Oh, thanks, Mary. Yeah, take care. Yeah, thanks. I'm sure.